this video, we'll learn what risk management is, the process of risk management, how to analyze risk, how to manage risk, and what risk IT framework is. To begin with, what is risk in the first place? In simple terms, risk is the possibility of something bad happening. Risk involves the uncertainty about the effects or implications of an activity with respect to something that humans value, often focusing on negative, undesirable consequences. Risk management. It's the process of identifying, assessing, monitoring, and controlling the outcomes derived from risk. Risks are inherent in any basis and cannot be avoided. However, you can lower the level of risk via risk management. Risk cannot be entirely removed, it can only be minimized. Risk management factors to consider. From an organizational perspective, what are the critical resources and what is the value of these critical resources and the IT assets involved? What's the impact to the organization if these critical resources were to be compromised? What are the legal or regulatory compliances an organization must follow? What countermeasures or defenses and security controls are in place, and what's the cost to implement them? Lastly, what are the risk monitoring techniques that are being carried out? And how do employees report the risk posture and the compliance requirements to senior management? Risk management process. To begin with, it's about identifying the risk, then assessing the risk, then it's about developing a risk management plan, then implementing the risk management actions, and lastly, it's about re-evaluating the risk. Risk management method. These methods are used to handle risk. It's not necessarily the same as eliminating the risk. Risk management is about preparing against the risk. It can be done by carrying out the following methods. Risk mitigation. It's about implementing measures to eliminating known vulnerabilities. The idea of risk mitigation is to reduce the extent of the exposure to risk and the adverse effects of risk. Assume that one of the risks your organization faces is the risk of data loss. Now that you've identified the risk of data loss, you can implement measures to minimize the effect of this risk. You can back up data as required to reduce the adverse impact it has on your organization. Risk transfer. It's about transferring the organizational risk to another entity to save it from the aftermath of a disastrous outcome. You can do this by insuring your business to compensate for the loss in case of an adverse event. Risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is all about avoiding or eliminating activities that involve risk in the first place. The idea is to avoid taking on unnecessary risks, especially when you are unprepared to deal with a loss. Risk acceptance. After mitigating, transferring, and avoiding unnecessary risk, you still can't eliminate all risk. There's always the risk caused by uncertainty. At some point, the cost to eliminate all risk outweighs the profit your organization makes. Risk acceptance is a conscious strategy of acknowledging the possibility for small or infrequent risks and proceed with business operations without taking the steps to hedge, insurance, or avoid those risks. Risk analysis. Risk analysis is the process of assessing the likelihood of an adverse event occurring. Risk analysis seeks to identify, measure, and mitigate various risk exposures or hazards facing a business. There's two types of risk analysis. Firstly, there's a quantitative risk analysis. Quantitative risk analysis uses mathematical models and simulations to assign numerical values to a risk. It assists in measuring the magnitude of impact. It enables business management to prioritize or rank risks. It calculates the absolute financial values. Qualitative risk analysis. In qualitative risk analysis, it relies on a person's subjective judgment to build a theoretical model of risk for a given scenario. It's more of an educated guess. In qualitative risk analysis, it uses different scenarios and ranks the threats based on the probability of the threat occurring. It's based on expert judgment, intuition, and experience instead of financial values. It ranks risks based on severity. Key risk indicator. Key risk indicator is used as an early warning indicator of increased risk exposure. It is a measure used in management to indicate how risky an activity is. Key performance indicator. KPI in short, is used to measure performance, and it can be used to create a detailed overview of past performance. It's used to measure the performance of security controls in place. Risk IT framework. It's a framework based on a set of guiding principles featuring the organization's business processes and management guidelines. It serves as a structured process to identify potential organizational threats and come up with a strategy in order to minimize the number of risks and its impact on the organization. Risk IT framework is also used to evaluate the effectiveness of current security strategy.